Hey everybody, this is Perch, and a lot of news coming out as things seem to be moving faster and faster. And one of the things, you've been listening to this channel for a while, is I mentioned that it was all but a foregone conclusion that DC would start producing comics in other international markets and would probably use something like Webtoon in order to do it. And this isn't any kind of genius call by me. When Daniel Cherry first came in and Jim Lee talked about plans almost a year ago, they explicitly laid out that going to other markets was a priority, investigating digital was a priority, and you can kind of just put one and one together. This is what the inevitable result is. So the announcement is that DC characters are coming to webcomics through a deal with Webtoon. So basically, in short, DC has signed a deal with Webtoon. Webtoon, and we'll talk more about them in a minute if you're not familiar with who Webtoon is. Webtoon's owned by South Korean internet company Naver. And they are going to create new, original, standalone web comics that will appeal to all fans without the need to know or read any previous stories. So standalone books, really kind of taking the iconic aspect of the characters, and somewhat self-contained. So most Webtoon comics typically go about somewhere between 50 to 60 episodes per season, and each episode is typically 50 to 70 panels presented in a vertical scroll format. Very different from what a lot of people are used to if you're used to traditional comics. It's a completely different way of reading. Again, we'll get more to what kind of Webtoon does in a second and how the payment works and all that kind of stuff. But basically, the way I think you should think about this is if you're a long-term DC comic reader, you love the comics, you're a collector, you got back issues, all the rest of that kind of stuff, then this is most likely, I'm being kind of general here, probably not your cup of tea. This is going to be a very different style than you're used to reading. Now, there's tons of comic fans out there, certainly, that like print material, like digital material, don't expect them to be the same. And I've met more people recently who they object to the printed comics format, kind of what we're used to. They don't like that just translated to digital. But they are willing to go to digital if it's completely different, a story. It's more like almost a hybrid of a comic and a movie. That tends to be something they are interested in. So who knows whether you'll go for this or not. But basically, that's the big story. And this is being seen and touted as a pretty massive deal. Daniel Cherry, again, this was one of his priorities. He said, DC is excited to introduce our iconic characters to a new generation of fans worldwide, specifically the worldwide part. DC Comics SVP, General Manager Daniel Cherry, said in a statement, he added that DC has been working closely with the Webtoon writers and artists to adapt our characters and stories to Webtoon's mobile format. Our shared goal is to create fun and compelling DC stories that all readers will enjoy. Now, here's something interesting there. Basically, what's being said, and what I've heard from some people who are pretty pissed in the background, is that DC will be largely leveraging existing Webtoon creative talent as opposed to using their own people or people that have been working with them for some time. There's a handful of creators, particularly some of the more independent, newer, up-and-coming creators who were kind of, I think, expecting that some of these digital plans would include them. Because historically, when DC has done their digital first comics, they have, that's where a lot of the entry level people go. It's kind of how they cut their teeth. They do these digital comics first, then they make their way into, ultimately the published comics. However, with this model is going to be very different, where it really appears like they're going to leverage the creators who are already on the platform, and most likely creators who exist in Korea and other territories where Webtoon is very popular. Webtoons, so a little bit about kind of Webtoon, the publisher. This launched in 2004. It started in its Naver Webtoon in Korea, Line manga in Japan. You have a number of others, Webtoon in China, and then Webtoon in English, French, Indonesia, Spanish, Thailand, and Germany. That's the regions this thing kind of plays in. And if you're familiar with Line, and one of the things that you might want to consider is getting familiar with Line, that's L-I-N-E. It's a social media platform that's typically used over in Asia, really used in Japan. And it is it's very different. But I think you're gonna that it's going to grow, and eventually you're going to be doing more with it, I suspect. Just as a thing out there, if you want to go kind of check it out. Um, the basic idea is that there's a free aspect to it, very in many ways in a simple way of looking at it, very similar to Shonen Jump app, where there's some free content and then there's a paywall where you get more. The difference is, I believe that eventually you're forced. I mean, if you're really up on it, you could follow manga on the Shonen Jump app for free, technically, if you were just reading every week and making sure you hit all the chapters and you start at the beginning somehow. You could do it with Webtoon. I believe you eventually get pushed into where you have to pay in order to see the whole comic. However, Webtoons the episodes are cheap. So when we talk about one of these 70 panel episodes, which is shorter than a comic, but not by much. It feels like a similar read. It's about 50 cents. Depends a little bit on how things are going. It's again very similar to Shonen Jump model. There's been comics before. So Line Webtoon had partnered with Stan Lee before his passing. Mark Silvestri has done some work there with Image. Cyberforce went to Webtoon. There's been a handful of titles over the years. This one is seen as a much bigger deal because it is, it's DC's kind of whole lineup. And DC has specifically said that they will be bringing the iconic characters Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, and more. And there will be announcements kind of consistently over the next few weeks. It is going to happen relatively fast. You're going to be able to get content there quick, and that there will be first available in English, followed by other language translations. And that may seem weird if you're talking about a kind of global piece of content, but not really, because there's a lot of English content on Webtoons, actually, even in other markets. So that's not the weirdest thing in the world. It's growing. It boasts that about a year and a half ago, it was saying that it gets more than 100 billion views. It has a pretty robust financial model. It's got 72 million monthly active users. Of those 72 million, 10 million are in the US, which gives you kind of an indication of where its power is in Asia, more than any other region, but it's definitely growing. And, overall, this is smart. This is DC basically getting their comics and their content out to other places. If you're thinking about, hey, how does digital really hit and go big? This is how. This is going to be where digital really starts to pull in some bigger numbers. Now, many of you listening to this right now, I know, will not go to it. You're a fan of the traditional print comics, and that's fine. But this is a smart move, particularly because it's kind of hitting two things at once. It's going digital, and it's going digital where the bulk of its market is already embraced digital, which is Asia. So that's a solid plan. If you're DC and you're trying to get in, I'm sure that looking at what happened with Deadpool over in Japan with the manga that they did there, it's just all signs point to, if you're trying to grow your product in an international way, taking that stop in Japan or in Korea, in the Asian market, is a good place to go. And if you're trying to push digital, that's the place you want to start. And so that's where it all basically makes sense. So it's an interesting. Webtoons is one of those things that it would be easy to kind of miss it if you were in the US, particularly if you're in the US and you're a traditional comic fan. However, with this announcement and with some of the other things that are coming out, it's going to be very hard to avoid. Now, I do see Marvel will sign a similar deal within the next 12 months, just almost guaranteed. There will be a similar announcement from Marvel. They can no longer afford not to play digitally and in Asia like they want to. And really the big question mark, given how much that Marvel Studios is pursuing the Asian market for their films, the real question is, why hasn't Marvel gone there already? This is a very late announcement is coming, even for DC. But this is likely to do some interesting things. It's also likely to reset some of the pricing of digital content, because again, the price here is much cheaper than what people have tried to shuffle off. I mean, the idea that a comic can be sold for $3.99, $4.99 in the US is absurd at this point in a digital format. It's almost absurd in a print format too, but definitely in a digital format. And this is going to reset that pricing. Even though the Webtoon product is a very different product from, just a traditional scanned comic book, it's still, there's no way you can have a 50-cent Webtoon competing with a $4.99, digital first comic. Arguably, where the Webtoon is being written and drawn by somebody who's really kind of spent a lot of time perfecting the medium, and the digital first comic is done by some people who are brand new trying to break into the industry. I mean, it's not going to compete. So anyway, we are seeing a price reset in digital throughout all this, but it's big news. This is very big news that DC is signed this agreement with Webtoon, and we'll see what comes of it. But exciting times, lots of content everywhere. What are you into? Let me know in the comments below if you're interested in pursuing this, if you would go to it or not. Yeah, I'm curious to hear what you think, or if you'd be willing to give it a try. And what do you think about that price point? Thanks for listening.